type of talk too, where you're saying like you have a team essentially, and the team is, helping to execute the fractional CMO advice or strategy that you set. So perfect. Yeah, we got tons to talk about.
Cool. All right. Recording is started. I'm going to live stream and let people in the waiting room in, and then y'all can get started.
Perfect. Love it.
Good morning, y'all.
Hey, Bonnie, how are you? And we got Cameron. We have a whole DM team here. And Axel, again, we can't miss Axel and Gabe. Oh, this is a great group coming in. Nice. Turn those cameras and get talking on fractional CMO work. It's funny because I just met with Eitan Pollinger, one of our other CPs, yesterday to do a podcast, and he's the same thing. He's doing a ton of fractional CMO work. So in case anybody didn't notice so far, we're talking about fractional CMOs. So one of the things that we do at DigitalMarketer, our certified partner program, is actually teach essentially a fractional CMO framework that you can employ in your business. And if nobody's done fractional CMO work today, you are in the right place in Agencies Talk. We have Monique Morrison, who has actually been kicking butt with some fractional CMO work. So we're going to be talking about that and kind of the state of agencies and maybe the next 6 months, kind of what we see happening. I think there's some really big changes coming up. And we'll get into it. So just so everybody knows, Agencies Talk is a talk. It's not really a webinar. It's we have capable professionals come on, usually certified partners from our own community, people who have succeeded using the frameworks and kind of executing what we teach here. And just so everybody knows, that's where we get all of our information. Since we aren't a marketing agency, we have to rely on outside professionals to give us up-to-date information on what's actually working, which is what makes DigitalMarketer special. So let's get into it. Welcome, Monique. How are things going?
Going well. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I think it's, the fact that you're so busy right now is incredible, because usually, I don't know about everybody else, but there is seasonality in marketing. And a lot of times the summer is super slow. And it doesn't sound like that's you right now. So why don't we just kind of talk about what you're doing on the fractional CMO side and how it's going?
Yeah, I actually like having it busy at this time because September, everyone kind of gets focused, kids go back to school. And if you haven't really been planning and building things during the summer, then come September, it just kind of gets wild and
little crazy, catch
a
up.
little unruly. Yeah. So I do primarily fractional CMO work. In the last couple of months, took on a few more clients. So my workload has been quite heavy, but it's always rewarding. And it's interesting because every team has different dynamics and different structures. And so as a fractional CMO, a lot of what I do when first coming on with the team is really to kind of understand who does what, where there's gaps. And so that's a lot of what I've been up to in the last couple months.
That's awesome. So just so people who are unfamiliar with fractional CMO work, how does fractional CMO work differ from, say, just being a consultant for a marketing consultant for a company?
Yeah, so I would say when you're a consultant, you are prescriptive in the sense that you will give advice, a strategy on what people can do to implement marketing. When you're a fractional CMO, you're really a part of how that's going to be implemented, how they're going to, you're with them along the way. You become an integral part of the team. And so for myself, I have these teams where I have to understand and meet with the team, be able to look at reporting of different campaigns. So I'm a fractional CMO a lot, mostly with marketing agencies and media companies. So that's where my main kind of focus is. And so as a fractional CMO, a lot of what I do is make sure that the marketing team is running, and a lot of times sales is a part of that. So instead of me just helping with strategy, I'm actually helping with the entire management and the facilitating of marketing within the team.
That's awesome. Now, with these companies that you're working with, have you found that they, why they would want to go with a fractional CMO versus just hiring a CMO?
Yeah, so like the one media company that I work with right now, they tried to bring someone in, and they're based out of Alabama. They're mostly a local team. And for this particular owner, he wanted to bring someone that had enough experience in digital marketing that they would be able to take on the project, and also be able to understand outside of the local community, being able to hiring an international team. They have plans to scale. And so for them, particularly bringing someone on that has this type of experience, they didn't want to go local or within their circles that they know. So that's one example. I have another company that's like a dealership. And again, they have people in house that can do social posting, that can do ads. I've been with them for 5 years now. And so they started off just training with me through my education company, going through courses. Then they went through my digital marketing mastery program. And I've just been teaching them. And now they have someone in house that manages a lot of the day-to-day marketing. So now I'm actually transitioning more into a consultant, because I've trained over the last 5 years people in-house to do a bulk of the work. So it varies, but usually primarily it's because they don't have someone on staff that can kind of run the ship, that can give the advice and make the executive decisions on which way. A lot of people want to be told what to do. They don't want to have to own that ownership. And so it can be difficult in marketing to be able to find someone that's willing to make those decisions and take those chances.
That makes a ton of sense, because I think, well, and the hiring of a CMO or any executive level period is a huge process, especially if it's a, multi-million-dollar company, where it's like a bad decision right here could screw up the whole company for like 6 months, 12 months. Like it could be years if you don't get the right person. So I think fractional CMO works, really well. And the way you approach it sounds like it makes a ton of sense, because you're actually training the people to execute the strategy. So you're essentially, being the strategic manager, and then you have kind of a day-to-day operational manager. And once you train all these people and you set up the systems, then the company could actually work. But like you said, it was 5 years. 5 years is a long time. And how much money did they save by not having to go through? Because the average C-level marketer, your CMOs, I think it's like 2 years, or they say like 2 years and 3 months. I think it's way shorter than that. I think it's probably like 6 to 12 months, and that kind of stuff just doesn't get reporting. Have you seen that same kind of situation happen, or the alternative where somebody had tried to hire a CMO and then it failed and they went with the fractional instead?
Yeah. So, and some teams, when you think of what they do for marketing, like a lot of, I don't want to say smaller businesses, because they still do, they're still in the millions of dollars per year. But when you think of like the size of a team, to bring in a CMO that is a full-time CMO in comparison to a fractional, sometimes it just doesn't make sense to have someone full-time. I find for myself, most of my clients, although I'm just starting with some new ones now, but I have a lot of long-standing clients that I've worked with 3+ years. And so, but the turnover in marketing is definitely is definitely high. And my goal is, and I think why my contracts end up being kind of have that longevity to them, is because I have that training component in it, where when I first meet a team, I meet with all of the team members one-on-one and ask them, where do you want to grow? What do you want to learn? What are the skill sets that you want to achieve? And so it becomes this environment of not just me coming in kind of being a dictator, but all of us working towards this goal, where everyone is in a position where they feel passionate about what they do, and they're excited to see where the company goes in terms of the vision. Everyone gets buy-in to that.
I love that. I mean, you know, instead of coming in, like you said, as a dictator, you're essentially coming in as an educator. And so, and that's a big part of it that people don't understand about executive roles is that there is a ton of politics in it. Like there's people who had expectations that weren't met. There are employees that may not understand the role of management and think that anybody can do it and why didn't they get that position, instead of what it's actually about, which is leadership. And leadership is way more complicated than people think it is. It's not like just something that happens. You know, it's like any skill that goes into any, you know, technical aspect of marketing, where the leadership component and the management component are individual skills that require their own experience, their own making so many mistakes that it hurts, and then eventually you come out as a better leader. And that's kind of what it is. So I love that the educational approach is huge. And the other aspect of it, and you could, you know, tell me if I'm right or wrong in regards to how you do it, but the process of actually proving that you're valuable is usually, it takes time. And how it usually starts is you go into a business, you assess, and then you find the low hanging fruit. You find the thing you could add the maximum value to them, like immediately, just to prove like, hey, Monique knows what the heck she's talking about. Do you have a similar approach to when you start these contracts?
Exactly. Yeah. So usually there's quite a few meetings before contracts are signed, learning about each other. I have done even kind of personality tests, so that I can show them what type of leader that I am. I kind of come with all of that, but typically when I quote or give a proposal, I usually have the first 90 days mapped out. Like, these are the things that I want to implement right away. And then these are the things based on that particular company's goals, how we're going to implement and where I see that timeline happening, because people do want things instantaneous, but there's things that just take time and take a process. For instance, like meeting with the team. Sometimes, like one company I have, they have a team of salespeople, and the salespeople have never really had to work and coexist with marketing because they've always just been more order takers in terms of programmatic display ads and that kind of thing. And so even just kind of getting them shifting the way that they sell, that's different, right? And when you go from programmatic display to implementing a customer value journey, that's kind of two different things in how you speak to people. So that's just one example where I would love to have that immediately in place, but having to educate the sales team is a process. And the CVJ was honestly, I have a standing sales and marketing meeting with that particular team, and the CVJ was the first thing that I ran and I taught through. So I usually do 10 minutes at these meetings, 10 minutes of learning and 10 minutes of tool time right at the end, so people can get familiar with the things that I'm going to be implementing and teaching. And the customer value journey is always the first thing. So it's like, okay, we're not just order takers anymore. This is what we're doing. We're going to build a system. And so that usually helps to get people focused and excited.
I love that approach, because I think, you know, it's kind of funny because of course the customer value journey, you know, we're a digital marketer. But I've done the same thing where I've talked to people who don't really understand the role of marketing. They think marketing is TikTok ads, or they think it's Facebook posts, or they think it's email campaigns, or they think of all these things. And really what they're describing is just tools and individual methods, not the strategy. The strategy has to come back into the base, which is the CVJ in most cases. And once you explain that to them and show that you have a structure and a core understanding of the entire path that a customer has to take to become a lifetime customer and a repeat customer and somebody who actually advocates for your brand, then they start to pay attention, is what I've seen. And it sounds like that's exactly what you do. And it's so simple. You know, it's like you said, it takes 10 minutes and then people will now listen to you. So I think that's fantastic. Now, a lot of times I know it's the CEO or the owner or the founder, or whoever it is, it's somebody who's at the very, very top that hires somebody like you as a fractional CMO. How do they go about not convincing? Well, yeah, it is convincing. How do they go about talking to their subordinates, the executives, the managers, about your role within the company? Do you kind of tell them what to say, or how do you usually get introduced to the rest of the team?
Yeah, so I usually do help them a little bit with the verbiage in terms of how I'm introduced, just because when you're an outsider coming into a team, you want to be able to have as much, I don't want to really say buy-in because it's not buy-in, but you want to be able to come in a way that doesn't kind of ruffle it feathers, so to speak. And so a lot of times I really just kind of focus on, I'm an educator. I'm really good at systems and processes, because usually people will be like, yeah, we really need to work on our systems and processes. I haven't really found a company yet that doesn't. And so instead of just coming in really headstrong, kind of like all of my relationships in life, I just kind of bring myself in. But really, before we do a big announcement to the team, I usually like to meet. There'll be some talk about that I'm coming on the team, but I do try to like to meet everyone first before doing a big one. So that's, I know some people do that differently, where they want to have a big company-wide announcement, but I usually do it a little bit softer. So that way, when I come to meet everyone, I understand what each person individually, what their personalities like, what their goals are. And so as I speak to the vision and the strategic plan moving forward, I can make sure to include the things that I've heard from the team, so that they understand that, okay, we're moving in the right direction, and I'm excited to work with this person.
That's super smart. And I think that that one touch point, just saying, hey, I'm going to meet, especially with the, managers and executives and the people who usually lead to the political issues that I mentioned. Yeah, being one-on-one and helping them understand that you're a person, you're here to help. You're not here to screw up everything they got going on. But I can imagine there is some education that has to take place, because one of the things that we talk about a lot at Digital Marketer is that marketing is part of literally everything that goes into a business, from accounting to procedures to customer care to product development to all these different things. Like, it's all essentially marketing has to at least know about it. But a lot of times, if you have somebody in like finance or some type of position like that, they don't understand how the culture and the mission and the vision, how that has to literally be part of every aspect, and marketing is a core component of that. Do you have a method of kind of educating these people on kind of why marketing has to meet with everybody and understand everything?
Yeah, so there's kind of two parts to that. There's one, them understanding why it's important for them to understand marketing and meet with marketing. And it's also an opportunity for me to be able to ask them, how, as the marketing team, can I show up for you in a way that makes your job easier? What are the things that you have had experience with in the past with the marketing that was either frustrating, that you would change the process? What are the things that you want me to do that make your life easier? So it's not always just about how I want things done, or like how things need to be done. A lot of times this is a process of like, how can I support you as a marketing professional? But often when it comes to marketing, I don't really get into the semantics of it. It's more so like for instance, this media company, they want to grow. They're at 3 million now, and they want to grow to this in X amount of years. And so in order for me to be able to do that, these are the things that I know that I have to be able to achieve. And with that said, this is how I see your team or your role helping to assist in that company goal. And so that's usually how I'll position it. Instead of just marketing, it's more like growth and numbers and focused on those areas.
I love that. I was literally writing down your questions that you asked, because I'm like, oh, that's such a good approach, because, at the end of the day, marketers, we're really relationship managers, right? We have to, understand the relationship between a company and the customers, between the company and the employees, between managers, and blah, 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 blah. But all of it is connected, and all of it is related to talking to people and communication in general. I mean, that's what we do as marketers. We're communicators, we're also trying to sell everybody stuff, but that's just business. So I love that approach. That seems very understanding, very proactive, and actionable, but not aggressive. And I think the approach, and I've seen consultants do it before where they come in and, I remember one instance where a sales director came in and it's like, I'm running the show and I'm going to order everybody around and I'm going to order marketing around and all that kind of stuff. And it never works out well. They don't usually last very long. So I think you have a very good approach and that relationship side is huge. So nice work.
Thanks.
So for people who are interested in fractional CMO work, where maybe because for me, I actually got into fractional CMO work after I'd run my agency, my website and brand development agency for about 4 years, maybe almost 5 years before I was like, I'm going to try to be a fractional CMO. And that's how I ended up at DigitalMarketer, was really that process of fractional CMO work. Do you have people offer you jobs when you do a good job as a fractional CMO?
I've had a couple people, offer me jobs. It's never been something that I've been interested in, just because I like the flexibility of being fractional and I guess just at arm's length of the company. But definitely I've had people offer to do that, but for me it's just easier. And I'm Canadian based and most of my clients are based in the States, so it's just easier to bill through my corp as
That makes
opposed
sense.
to me personally.
Well, and the freedom is a big issue too, because I think it's entrepreneurs have individual mindsets and don't like having a boss tell you what to do every single second.
Yeah, and as a fractional CMO, like I'm definitely held accountable, and there's things that I have to do. And with some of my larger clients, I do within our proposal, I never tell them how much time I'm going to invest per week or how many hours they get. But what I do say is that if they're I don't call them VIP, but like say they're a top tier client, then I will say in there that I give precedence to their demands and needs in comparison to kind of one-off contracts. I have verbiage in my contract that speaks to that.
Oh, well, that makes tons of sense. Well, and it's I think that's a really good approach too, because I think that a lot of people will try to nail you down to a certain amount of hours. Like, well, I expect you to be doing 20 hours a week on my projects and blah, 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 versus what you do, which it sounds like you set the expectation. So do you focus more on probably procedures and deliverables? Is that versus how many hours?
Exactly. So when I come up with the proposal and we have the first 90 days mapped, and then kind of we go quarterly after that, it's not based on the hours that I'm investing, it's on the deliverables that I have laid out in the timeline, because sometimes they might take more and sometimes they may take less. For myself, a lot of people don't have SOPs in place, and so having had my agency for 11 years and being a systems and process person, like I have that drilled down and I have it all saved in an Airtable base. And so for me, it might not take me that much time to be able to come in and reprogram someone's ClickUp or Asana with proper systems and processes, but that's because I spent 11 years
doing the work,
building them, right? And so for me, that's not something that I could ever put an hourly time frame on, because so much has been invested. But for them to be able to see that kind of go into place, and then all of a sudden those processes start to run more smoothly, hourly, it wouldn't make sense to focus on how much time I've spent doing that.
No, I like that. Well, I think it goes more in line with the fractional CMO kind of title versus, which is if you think of a CMO is a salary position with bonuses and normal employment structure. So fractional CMO would be the same, where it's like, no, you get the job done and you show your work and you prove that you should be in this position. And it has nothing to do with how many hours you spend, because, who cares about hours? No, you want the work done.
I have it, and I just have it set up as a retainer. So for myself, usually I'll set myself up on the same cadence as their payroll if it's easier for accounting, but I just set up a subscription within Stripe, and then it just auto bills them on a 2-week
Mm.
rotation. So just as they would have to pay if they were paying a salaried employee, it just automatically happens.
Oh, that's super helpful. So let's talk about just a few of those deliverables, because I'm sure it sounds like you actually incorporate the education and the processes as a deliverable. Is that
Mhm.
right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's part of it. And then also just the actual strategy in terms of the growth. So with so that's yeah, so there's the education and the systems and the processes, and then there's the actual strategy and how we're going to come up with that. So that might include, you know, mapping out the marketing operating system. It might be looking at promotional calendars that the salespeople can focus on and use. So, and every client is different. Every client is so different. Like I have one client that's really wanting to be more brand awareness. They're established, but people don't know that they're now offering specific digital marketing services. And then I have like another client that we've been working for the last 6 months integrating their in-house CRM with high level through
Mm.
automations and actual data syncing and stuff like that, and teaching their in-house team how to manage that. So sometimes the deliverables can be so different, but I always like to try to tie it back to either growth or like refinement of costs.
Mm.
And so that can be employee costs, that can be softwares, that can be just, margins, holistically.
Oh, I love that. That's huge. That's like next level type of fractional CMO work, because I think it's really easy to just focus on the deliverables. But like you said, like you don't know what a company needs. You don't know what they're doing. You don't know, what they actually have to offer until you've been there for some time and had some time. So if you only focus on like, hey, I'm going to 10x your revenue or something like that, then you're not going to set yourself up for failure, but there's a good potential you're not going to be able to hit whatever that target is. And then you're going to have to argue the other side, like, oh no, it does take time. And I didn't know this thing, and so on and so forth. So by doing the procedures and by doing the education side, now you're adding another component of value that will allow you to give you the time, if nothing else, to be able to deliver the other side, which is the growth and everything that everybody wants. But it just takes longer most of the time.
Yeah. And sometimes you get on a team and you're like, I don't think there's a single person on this team that is going to fit into the vision. And so you kind of have to work with that, or, there's turnover. Sometimes there's people that don't agree with the company vision and how they're moving forward. So there's people that fall off. There's so many reasons. So yeah, just even the management of who the team is, understanding their strengths, that in and of itself can take time. And so when it comes to having that education component into it, I usually have to figure out, okay, who is it that's going to learn these particular skills? And sometimes I have to go out and hire someone. And in those instances, fractional CMO, as a fractional CMO, that can be where I kind of get into the weeds with things.
Mm.
Because it's like, okay, we have these clients that need campaigns that we're probably supposed to start already. I'm coming on now. There's no one really that I can delegate this out to. So I'm going to build the campaigns and hopefully, get someone
Find
in
somebody
for
to
the
do it.
next round. So sometimes you end up in the weeds doing the actual implementation, which is fine, but it kind of takes away from the higher level strategic stuff. So that's one thing to be mindful of, that can happen.
Well, and the thing is, like, even if you do your due diligence, there's some companies that don't even realize the holes that they have in places. And so it's nothing you could even predict
Mhm.
sometimes. So that's super helpful, because I think it is another side of the fractional CMO work where it's like, hey, yeah, you're not supposed to be doing the work per se, but sometimes you have to. And that's
Mhm.
okay, as long as you have a plan to stop doing the work at some point, then you can still set yourself up for not being just an in-house agency and doing everything for a whole company, because that's not really the role. So
Yeah, and you have to kind of forecast in your timelines. And I got good over this over the years, having my agency where it's like, oh, I think I can do it in this amount of time. And then a mentor told me, whatever amount of time you think it's going to take, double it and then double it again. And that's probably close to how much time it's going to take. And so I keep that in mind when I'm kind of thinking of these timelines, like, oh, I'll do that this week. It's like, no, you're not going to have that done this week. But there's things that you just can't predict. Like one agency I came into, they probably had, I'm going to say 25 clients. None of them had a business manager set up. Everyone had a personal ad account, like no pixel. Like it was just like the messiest situation I've ever seen. I'm like, how have you been running this for so long? So things like that, you don't know before you come in. So you do have to have a buffer in terms of my optimism and how long I think it's going to take and how long it actually will take, adding in some of those factors.
That's a huge tip too, because I'm probably the biggest violator of that, where I'm like, oh yeah, it's like a day, 2 days if I could focus, and it's always much longer. So I like the doubling of doubling, because then you're realistic and maybe you do get it done that fast, and then you're super impressive, or you just have a lot of time. So either way, it's a win, versus like, oh yeah, I get that done in 5 seconds, which is bad in a bunch of ways. Because if you do say like, hey, I could just get this done in 10 seconds, and then it doesn't happen, then you look like you don't know how to project time, which is a bad thing for a manager. And then also, maybe this job is way easier than you told them it was going to be, and now they're starting to question whether they're being overcharged for the work that you're doing, because you did it in 5 seconds, so it must be easy. And now you're just setting yourself up for not good things. So that's, I suggest everybody do that. Double of the double.
I do. Websites are like that too. When I used to build websites, I'd be like, I could do that really fast and surprise and delight them, or maybe I'll just wait a day and then tell them that it's done, because I don't want to set that precedence.
It depends. I mean, sometimes you're like, it's a personality. It goes back to a relationship, because sometimes you could do that and the person will be over the moon thankful. And maybe they have a million other projects that they're like, oh, well, now I found the person, so here's a million other projects. And there's another type of person who is completely clueless about what you just did, and now has the expectation that this is just normal. You should be able to set up an awesome looking website in 3 hours. And that's just what I expect now, because I've never done it before. So
yeah, it definitely depends on the client.
That's a good safety margin to put in there. And that's okay, because the other part is you think like, well, they should be smarter than that and understand that blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, it's that you don't know what they know. You don't know what they expect. Like, just set it up for you, set those expectations, and you'll be all right. Now, I have sucked up all the time, and we do have quite a few guests here. So real quick, if you'd like to ask a question, we do have the Q&A tool. If you could use that, or actually just do that, and then I'll bring up the question and probably have you come off of mic in order to ask it. But anything you want to ask Monique, she's run agency for quite a while, doing tons of fractional CMO work, has tons of experience doing that, and is very good at processes and procedures, which is a weak point for, I'd say, most people. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, usually people just,
that's what people say.
And once people do it a certain way, then if it worked, whether it worked efficiently or not, then they just kind of keep doing it because they've always done it that way. And so you end up with a lot of processes and procedures that are because the first person that ever did it, that's how they did it. And that's just kind of where it's at, instead of efficiency. So 100%.
That's so true, because I think a lot of times when you write something down, like it goes into the manual or it goes into, for us, we have Notion, so we put all the official docs in Notion, then it's kind of like writ in stone, and nobody questions it after that, because obviously somebody took some time to make it. But yeah, if you do dive into that, so that's actually another really good tip. Like, even if somebody has marketing procedures, those procedures need to be reviewed today and understand where they came from, why they're there. And sometimes it might just be like, oh yeah, that was Billy the intern made that and you copied it and pasted it off of a Google search, and that's where we got our procedure. And then once you hear that, you're like, okay, I need to review everything.
Mhm.
But that is a process too. So how do you go about kind of suggesting and revising, procedures that maybe people don't even understand why they're there anymore?
Well, I really do it in a way that I guess I don't really know how I kind of describe it. It's more so just usually what I'll do is I'll look at the process and then I'll explain to whether it's a project manager that manages the tasks and stuff like that, it how it can run. And so instead of being like, this is why we should do it, it's more so like, if we implement the processes that I want to implement, this is what's going to happen when you log in. This is how you're going to be able to find the information that you need.
Oh,
This is how we'll be able to track projects in a way that you can understand at a high level what's going on and easily find the information that you need to. And so usually I'm more like about the benefits of like, when we do this, this is how much easier your life is going to be and how you're going to be able to find things and manage things, and the reduction of workload as a project manager.
oh, that's another huge tip. You're just awesome. Because they, using the organization and your own learning process as the reason behind the review of all these other processes is a very PC way of questioning everything without being like, oh my God, who wrote this? Or do they
Yeah.
still work here?
And a lot of times when it comes to processes, like I'll look at something and then I'll say, okay, let's walk through this. So this is what happens. Okay. And then this is what happens. And then usually I don't say we should do this. Usually I say, well, what do you think would happen if we did this?
Mm.
And that's usually because then they say, well, I think this is what would happen. Oh, do you think we should switch that? And so again, that's about getting buy-in. And so probably a lot of this customer buy-in, before I got into marketing, I actually used to help hotels rebrand. And so I would have to work with entire food and beverage departments. So coming into smaller teams is actually much easier than having to work with like teams of 100 servers and banquet employees and that kind of thing. But yeah, so walking through the process and then asking them, well, what do you think would happen when this, if we were to switch that up to this, do you think that would make it easier? And then kind of it ends up becoming a shared vision as opposed to just telling them what they should do.
Yeah, it's like a directive. It's more like, no, what do you think we should do? And then, going through it. So that's a fantastic approach. And just for anybody, especially if you have a small business, like some of this stuff seems like silly, I guess is probably the best word for it. The fact that you have to tiptoe around or maybe I might feel like tiptoeing around, but it's not. It's essentially you're just understanding an organization that you've never been part of, and they have issues just like a family per se. Like every family has issues, and you're not going to understand them until you actually go through the process of learning them. But you could use that process of learning actually to implement the changes that are going to need to happen for them to be successful with your program. So that's just levels of sophistication there that you're actually basing your work on, which is super impressive. Actually, we do have a question from Ming. So he says, I hear that you're based in Canada and that you are supporting agencies based in the US remotely. Processes are likely dependent on culture, et cetera, as well, I guess. How do you overcome the remote nature of your work, but still deliver great value? And how might you win over the trust of the team who needs to work super closely with you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it definitely comes up, especially being Canadian. Like people will ask me, they'll be like, are you red or you blue? And I'll be like, I'm purple. I have no idea what you're
Donuts.
talking about. Yeah, like so that can definitely come into it. But I think those initial meetings with the team to be able to ask like what their vision is, what their goals are, and really giving them an opportunity to express themselves and listen. And then when they see me reference the talking points that they said to me in those one-on-ones, when I talk to the company as a whole, then they know that one, I listened during the meeting, but I actually absorbed it and I want to include it. That helps, definitely. And then when it comes to like, I have weekly meetings with the team members, like a sales and marketing meeting. And usually in those, I will start off with some kind of icebreaker. So especially when I first start, so I'll do something like, what's a random fact about you that no one would know? And then they have to put it into a private chat on Zoom. And then I make people guess, right? I'll read it out and people will have to try to guess to see if they know who on their team is. Or like two truths and a lie, right? So different things like that, where you end up building that rapport with people. I also try to tell personal stories when possible. So there was like a salesperson that went on a meeting. It ended up, they didn't know it was the person's house. And it just got kind of awkward. And so I had a similar one where I was able to tell this story. And then we were all just laughing. And so I think when you can have moments where you can like connect with someone on a personal level, I think it's important to do that with all the members of the team, no matter where they are on that hierarchy of team structure.
That's a great answer. And I love the icebreakers and the relational focus, because that's a big part of it. And even if you can deliver results, like being liked is helpful too. Like if it has its own value, going through the kind of friendship process and icebreaking process, and makes people more open, and actually makes you do your job much faster and more efficiently. So it's all win. Now, and actually kind of follow up for that question, do you find that you have to do research on, say, the legal policies, or, like in Europe, they have GDPR, where you're going to have, when you make a website, you're going to have to comply with these additional factors. Do you do any of that kind of, I don't know, kind of legal research approach when you're entering a market that's outside your country?
So I only work within Canada and the US right now,
Oh,
and a lot of it is fairly similar. The only difference would be, honestly, they are very, very, very similar. So there might be things that I'm not aware of from a legal standpoint. But for the most part, I haven't really come across that. Usually because I've worked with a lot of people that are, chiropractors, doctors, that kind of thing, that are usually ruled by their board or their schooling, that I have those questions just naturally. But I haven't really come across it as something that comes up often. But I'm sure if I worked with UK clients, it would come up
well,
more
and really,
often.
if you talk to the manager, just like you're talking about, where you meet each executive one-on-one, you could just ask those questions, like, hey, are there any, things I need to worry about? What do I not say? I dealt with a lot with financial advisors and lawyers, where lawyers actually had to have the bar review every page of their content printed out and shipped to them before they'll approve a website. And I'm like, oh God, this is not going to be my focus, because this is
No.
too much time and work. But but I don't want to turn anybody off to working with lawyers, because they have money and they really need the service to differentiate themselves. So don't be afraid of the profession, but know that there are some legalities that go into it. Let's see, we have a question from Joy, who says, I have a client where they didn't have anyone internally to implement the marketing plan until a month ago. I started with them 12 months ago and told them my limitations were creating content to deploy. I told them my limitations, or content to deploy, I guess, is part of the limitations. Getting a marketing coordinator took months. Everyone is frustrated and how slow things have moved. We don't have good results yet. I only now have enough data and a resource who can help deliver the full plan. I'm weighing how long to stay on. Have you had a similar experience where things didn't align well and you had to decide how long to keep trying? And how did you evaluate that?
Yeah, so I have had that where things didn't move as quickly as I guess some people wanted. But I think if it was only myself and in order for me to be successful, I needed to have that secondary person that just got brought on, letting them know in advance that that is a requirement to the success of this plan. And so, for instance, one of the media companies I work with, in my 90-day plan, it listed hiring a secondary project manager that is going to take on this role. And that I will do it in the interim, but that needs to happen in the first 90 days. And if that didn't, then I have it in my plan so I can say, okay, now that we don't have this person in place, if what they were going to be doing on a full-time basis or even on a part-time basis is now being put on my shoulders to carry that weight, then it takes my focus away from the other things, the other deliverables that I have. And so as a fractional CMO, part of what I come in with is the ability to understand team structures, the requirement of the people, and being able to let my clients know how that needs to be structured and when they should bring people on. And so I would build that expectation right off the bat if they weren't able to do that hiring, that this is going to prolong it, so that they know in advance to either say yes to the extension of time or to put a higher priority on hiring someone.
That makes tons of sense. The expectations are just huge, because I think everybody, the problem is that everybody's very optimistic at the beginning of any of these relationships. Like, oh yeah, we'll figure it out. If problems happen, we'll just talk about it. And usually it doesn't work quite like that. People get upset pretty quickly, especially if you say, hey, the work that I did for you is based on somebody executing the work, which is not included in what I charged you. And now you're going to have to hire that person. Or did you ever put a clause in there like, hey, if I have to execute this task, then that's going to implement this, part of the contract where you say, I'm going to have to hire somebody, or my team's going to have to do it, and I have to pay my team. So I'm going to need an additional, $10,000 a month or whatever it is.
Yeah, so I have it that if we need to hire third-party people, that I have the discretion to do that. And so whether they're hiring internally or whether we're getting a VA or something like that, that part of the process is that I have the ability to do that. And so oftentimes what that looks like is, if they say, okay, well, you can hire a VA, but I don't want to pay more than X per hour, right? Like I won't really include it in what I bill, because they will get billed directly by the people that I bring on. But I will have, if we need to hire externally, then I will do that in order for this to work forward. I will do the interview process. I will bring that person on, and I will be allotted a budget of X amount in order to be able to bring that person on.
That makes sense. Well, and it still goes back to expectations, because you could just say that at the beginning, like, hey, if you guys don't have the team, or if your team, after I do my assessment, they're not qualified to execute this plan that I put together, then I'm going to suggest that you go outside, but that's not included in my fee. And, and then you go from there, or I need an additional whatever dollars. But it all comes back to what you said originally, which was setting expectations correctly leads to less problems in the future, which makes tons of sense to me. Now, we don't have too much time left, but I'm sure everybody's having the burning question, which is, how much do fractional CMOs get paid? So, and you don't have to say anything specific about your existing contracts, but if you could give just some kind of like what you can expect to charge people, or what should you charge people? Because it's an involved job. Like I said at the beginning, I only took 1, 2, maybe 3 of these clients at a time, because it was so much work that if I tried to, do 50 of these, there's no way it could work. So what do you suggest people kind of start at, and what's the range that people can expect to make off of one of these contracts?
Yeah, so because everything is just so specialized to the team, it does vary a lot. But that one client, that's a dealership that I've been with for 5 years, I started off being a lot more involved. My retainer at that point was like $6,000 a month. And that was quite involved working with the team, educating them. Over time, we've adjusted that. So now I just do more strategic, or if the in-house person is having trouble implementing like a automation or something in Make, then I come in and do that. But I'll attend meetings, I'll work with third-party vendors. Now that's more of like a 3,000 a month. I have clients where I have where I'm actually managing the team. So from an agency standpoint, where there's like a paid traffic team, like multiple teams, that I don't do for less than well, it's a bi-weekly retainer. So that one's like about 4K every 2 weeks. So honestly, it really varies. But if you can set up what you think that's going to look like, then kind of base it off that. So, and I've been doing it for quite a while, and so I'm comfortable charging the amounts that I charge, because I know I can come in. And so, but if you're just getting started, then think about what they would have to pay as a full-time salary plus mercs. And then you can decide if you want to match that, if you want to come slightly below it, in and around there. But I would look at what the rate is, because even from LA to Alabama, right? It's like there's a big difference in cost of living, what people have for expectations in terms of what they pay for salaries. So I would pull all of that in, and then lastly look at like growth wise. So one client, my retainer is paid bi-weekly, but it's 100K a year. But that's because I know that right now they're at 3.2 million, and what they've set me to do is grow them to 10 million in 3 years. So they literally want me to triple a $3 million business, which is not impossible. But I know that the workload for that and the things that I have to do to be able to do that is going to be quite large. There's also, so now I'm kind of just going off a little bit more, but then there's also like base salary and then bonuses. And so sometimes you might just do a straight retainer. This is just kind of like a salary. And then there's also looking at like bonuses, like what am I set out to do? How does that affect the company? And is there a percentage of that I should be asking for as a bonus?
Oh, that's great advice, because that, and, like you said, it's all kind of dependent on the situation, what their expectations are, and even how big the company is. Because I will say that there is a minimum size for companies that should be hiring a fractional CMO. Because, say you have a $1 million business, and that sounds like a lot of money, but if you consider like a CMO might make $100,000 to maybe $250,000 a year, now that's a quarter of their revenue. There's no way they can afford to do that unless it's like a temporary agreement. But and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but fractional CMO stuff should never be a temporary agreement. It has to be 3 to 12 months, I would say. And if you don't have that range, then usually they couldn't. Yeah, LA County, Lewis just said, is 310,000 median salary. So, it's the company size should be, I would say, minimum, I'd say 3+ in order to afford something like this.
Exactly. Yeah. And in most of my contracts too, I do make a depending on the client, but usually I'll stay with them 3 years is usually what I try to start it off. Yeah. I make that as a minimum time frame and then kind of move from there.
I love that. Well, and really even just having that minimum time frame shows that business has been in business for a certain amount of time, and their expectation is realistic, where it's like, oh no, you're not going to get us up to $10 million in 3 months. Like that's
impossible. Yeah, no. And honestly, that's like to triple something like that. I wouldn't go in and just like make blanket promises like like that. I had actually met with this company. We pulled up their financials. I could see they had been in business for over a decade as a media company. I could see how many clients they had that have just done print, that have done like certain things. So I could see within the scope of that it was possible. And so that's why I was willing to make a claim on that.
Well, I think you are doing an amazing job. Apparently, Maddie Appleseed, whoever that was, is a troll for us. So we're deleting some people on there. It's so funny. I can't imagine wasting my time, even as a troll, to go on something that I don't like unless they have something against one of us. But these people amaze me sometimes. Anyways, you've been fantastic, Monique. I think your answers have been incredible. Like, just some of the tips that you've given in here will actually, I mean, if you want to do the fractional CMO work, everything Monique says was amazing, and is a great way to approach this type of contract, because it's a complicated thing, and it's super involved, and there's a lot of emotional and, you know, physical work even that goes into establishing these and then making them succeed. And I think your tips are fantastic. So thank you so much for that. With that said, where can people learn more about you?
You can go to my website, moniquemorrison.ca. That's probably the best place to find me, and on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. And at Digital Marketer too. So
Yeah.
Monique is one of our mastermind mentors. And so she actually helps other businesses that work with Digital Marketer in order to figure out marketing. And she's taught a million lessons, and she's been part of Digital Marketer forever. And we love you here at Digital Marketer. So thank you, Monique. And thank you, all of you, for being part of this. This is a fantastic showing. I hope you learned something. And if you do have advice for us, we do need contributors all the time. So never be afraid to ask to be on the podcast or contribute an article or anything, because we need your help. And we appreciate you being part of the crew.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you all. We'll be back next Friday. Tune in.